Welcome to Sips, Suds, and Smokes. Not so live from the Dude in the Basement studios. Here are your hosts, the Good Old Boys. Welcome to Sips, Suds, and Smokes. This episode will feature a Sips and Suds segment, and we'll be catching up on our Smokes segments in some later episodes. In our Sips episode, we'll feature Good Old Boy Mike butchering most of the French language.
I'm French! Why do you think I have this outrageous accent, you silly king?
3 champagnes or sparkling wines, and a momentary identity crisis for Reverend Mark.
That is mental!
In our Suds episode, we will feature a blind tasting of 4 IPAs, managing to practically offend no one.
Oh, isn't that special?
Up first is our Sips segment with Good Old Boy Mike, Good Old Boy Jim, and Reverend Mark. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another segment of Sips. On this Sips segment, we're discussing bubbly, which goes by many names: sparkling wine, champagne, that fizzy stuff you drink at weddings and New Year's Eve. I'm Good Old Boy Mike, and joining me here are co-hosts Good Old Boy Jim.
Hello.
And Reverend Mark.
Hi, y'all.
He's so thrilled. This is his favorite topic. I think I had to twist his arm off to hop through this one. You know, I tend to think of this style of these wines in 3 categories. And the first one is very close to Good Old Boy Jim's heart, which is stuff that sucks with carbonation.
Exactly. I don't even think you need to go with the other 2. Just
Well, the other 2 categories I have are California sparkling wine and champagne using Method de Champagne, or the good stuff. And Good Old Boy Jim, you said you've had the good, bad, and the ugly?
I have. And you pay a lot of money for it, or you go out and buy grape malt duck. I don't really care. It's pretty much a ruination of grapes and everything else.
You know, I like this. We're going to piss off and offend an entire country with this segment alone. All right, so sparkling wines are produced worldwide, and many producers use special terms to define them. Like in Spain, they use cava. And Italy designates it as spumante. And Italian sparkling drink with Muscat grape is called Asti. So, there's a lot of things, but ooh la la, the French, they do not like it when you call things champagne, when it's not from Champagne. So, yeah, if you're from Burgundy or Alsace or Cremant, you forget it. You know, there is no way on the free planet they are going to call that champagne. So it got really ugly because in 2008, more than 3,000 bottles of sparkling wine produced in California, labeled with the term champagne, were destroyed by the Belgian government. Can you believe that? They actually went out. I like Belgians, and they have this all-out assault on California grapes.
I don't see them as aggressive people myself.
They need to have more of their beer.
Well, there's the Belgian Congo and all went on down there.
Yeah, there's a whole French-speaking section of that, though. So
Come on,
they
fellas,
probably
give
did.
it up. It's champagne. All right. So in France, the first sparkling champagne was created accidentally. Its pressure led to it be called the devil's wine, la vin du diable, as bottles exploded or corks jolted away. Contrary to legend and popular belief, Dom Perignon did not invent sparkling wine, but he did make important contributions to the production and quality of champagne wine. Mainly, second fermentation would always be 1.5 years, and the riddle method would be consistent. So, all right, enough of all this, wine technobabble. We were tasting 3 champagnes and discussing 3 of these wines. I'll be butchering the pronunciation and generally offending the French as we discuss these wines. Oui, monsieur, you are offensive. All right, so the 3 champagnes we have to talk about are Bugey-Cerdon. It's a sparkling gamay. Duval-Leroy Brut, Brut? All right, I'm going to get it yet. And Henriot Brut Souverain. I'll post these on Facebook, so you will not have to wade your way through those. And I'll try to say them with a bit. Yes, you have butchered all of our famous towns and vineyards, you redneck wine geek. I cannot believe you go out like this. All right, so up number one is the Bugey-Cerdon. All right, so this is a sparkling Gamay, which is probably unusual for what I think of in terms of champagne. You usually think of things that are white and bubbly and always hit that mark. But a lot of things that I liked about this. So Bugey is one of the best kept secrets in France. As a geographical crossroads from Savoy, Jura, Burgundy, and Rhone, it's one of the few regions that can be seen both palm trees and snow within one eye shot. Very similar to La California. Anyway, they bottled this low-alcohol wine using method en strail, a rare technique that experts believe predates the method champagne. This wine.
Did you just do that?
I just transferred right there into, Frenchy. Anyway, the wine first goes through a primary fermentation in the Cueille and then is bottled before all the residual sugar has converted to alcohol. To me, I'm kind of like, well, isn't that the method of champagne? After going through a secondary fermentation in the bottle for at least 2 months, the wine is ready. So champagne's dosage is not permitted, I'm trying to figure out what is the difference between this and the method, champagne, where they, the only thing I didn't see them mention here was basically where you have a wine cap and you disgorge, the bottle, and then, cork the bottle from that get-go. Right. So, I don't get it, why this is so super special, but something about that rare technique. I don't know. You've bottled a bunch of stuff, Reverend Mark. What do you think about that?
But I know what you're talking about, and I've never attempted to
go for exploding bottles.
Right, not in the way French do. So every time I contemplated it, I heard the words from the castle from Monty Python's Quest for the Holy Grail.
Now go away, or I shall taunt you a second time.
Well, leave it to the English to offend the French. We'll let them do it first. We're second. All right. This was a very interesting choice, and some of the tasting notes I put down here is that it's really just a beautiful rosé with a good balance of sweet and tart, and it's something I would really serve to a very large group of people. This is definitely something I'd break out in song. To probably buy, in large quantities. I serve cooks, at my wedding, and I probably would have chosen this had I probably been a bit more wherewithal. So it has a very different price point than cooks, but not that much more. But so anyway, our sips rating for this is actually a 3, which is... interesting. What was that again? It's definitely one of the things that I'd put on your radar to check out if you're buying bubbly. All right, so next up for Champagne, we move to the people in the region of Champagne, France. But, this is interesting. This is Duval-Leroy Brut. I'll say it in English, or for those people that are just a bit more certified, as Duval-Leroy Brut. This is from the Champagne region of France, but this is a non-vintage champagne. I think we've all had, a bit of a cut between vintage and non-vintage champagne. What do you think, about vintage and non-vintage champagne? A big difference for either of you?
Well, I have to say that I would really need to contemplate how, I guess a vintage would have to do with the quality of the year, for one thing, that being more of a beer expert, I would just have to evaluate it on the basis of the vintage year. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, no different than, wines, run really well with the harvest or, but, yeah, I mean, anytime I think that you store something, you're altering, some aspect of the way that it's going to taste over time. I mean, well, what do you think at ol'boy, Jim? I mean, you've had the vintage stuff and the non-vintage.
Well, again, I don't see...
And the horrible stuff with carbonation.
True. Stuff that sucks with carbonation. So, again, I don't know that it's necessarily... It doesn't change that much for me. And again, I kind of like Reverend Mark. I mean, I guess it would...
Other than lightening your load in your wallet?
Pretty much. I don't see... again, you have to understand, my perspective is that you drink champagne when someone says toast at a reception, at a wedding, New Year's. And that's really probably so much of the reason why a lot of it is consumed in those areas and in large parties. So again, I'm not sure after the first or second glass that anybody could tell you anything about the difference of it.
Well, here's some of the notes about this particular the Duval-Leroy champagne. It's a product that can fill a unique power and character which marks out the top of the range champagne, which I think is really saying an awful lot. Consistency, expertise, and creative spirit ensure success, which needs no further demonstration. And I think that's what's very difficult to do about champagne. I think you can get away with bloody murder and be a crappy winemaker and have great grapes and still knock it out of the park. And I think that you can be a great winemaker and just, have difficult grapes. And I'm sorry, but, in a non-vintage production, I think that you're just kind of at the mercy of, the weather gods, at that point. And it's, just kind of difficult. So, the interesting thing, this is actually a blend of Pinots and Chardonnays. And I know your first reaction is going, you just put red grapes in a white wine. How do you do that? Well, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, they just simply, they don't put the outside skins, in the fermentation barrel. So, a Pinot itself, I mean, would be white, without seeing the grape skins on them. So, anyway, very interesting bubbly. Our sips rating for this is a 4. Let's keep this secret to ourselves. Please pour me another. I think that it hits right on the mark with what, good ol'boy Jim and I are talking about. I say that it's about as close to a Don without Dom Perignon without dropping another C note. So it's probably one of the best, non-vintage champagnes for a special occasion, that I've had. So, all right, last bubbly we have to talk about here is the Henriot. I'll spell it for you. Henriot. Henriot. I don't know how the French say it. It is a Brut, Souverain. This is another vintage that comes out of the Champagne region, but a slightly different part of the Champagne region, where this is from, than the last one we talked about. So, some of my tasting comments, especially on the nose, that it's citrus and yellow fruit, a lot of floral, is how this one kind of smelled. We've all think that champagne is a lot about how it feels on the palate. Very lively, fresh, vibrant attack on your palate, and with just a hint of some vanilla that kind of gets up on you really fast. So, it's very balanced for a Brut. A lot of people tend to think, oh, that's dry. It's supposed to be dry. That's why it's called a Brut. And it's definitely a very good choice. My sips rating for this is 4. Let's keep this secret to ourselves. Pour me another. And, it's a really great choice. So, listen, those are 3 great bubblies to check out if you haven't seen them and you're making some choices to celebrate New Year's Eve or another special occasion. Maybe one of these will hit your mark. This is good ol'boy Mike and
good ol'boy Jim
and good ol'boy Mark
and Reverend Mark.
But you're the Reverend Mark.
You have an identity crisis?
You can't.
Not at all.
You cannot be a good old boy reverend.
I guess I'm going to tell Reverend Mark, keep sipping and enjoy. Hello and welcome. This is our Suds segment for today. This is good old boy Mike, and today I am joined by Reverend Mark.
How you doing?
And good old boy Jim.
Hello.
In today's segment for Suds, we have a blind taste testing that we've done with 4 IPAs that are on the market, and we're going to have a chance to rate these and about our tasting here. The 4 Suds that we're tasting today is Schlafly Tasmanian IPA, 3 Floyds, Artic, Panzer, Wolf, Choc, Oklahoma Pale Ale, and Lagunitas Hop Stoppid are the 4 beers that we've tried today. So we've set these up in a blind taste testing, and we don't always, taste everything this way, and it's always a very interesting experience when we do a blind taste testing, and we were kind of chatting about it, before we started the segment here. And I know good old boy Jim, you were saying about how it's, kind of shaped up and influenced what you thought.
Well, I was just saying, when you go to a store and you're looking for a beer, and maybe you're looking for a beer you haven't tried before, and you wind into a store, a good one that has a good selection, and they also have a lot of reviews posted, or maybe you've tried a beer from that brewery before, or something as possibly inconsequential. You just like the looks of it. You like the looks of it just looks like a really
you like
good
the
beer.
Naked Girl.
I did
on
the St. Pauli
label,
Girl.
yes.
I do buy a lot of that.
I know. It's always about the weak moment.
And if you took that beer home, if you just bought the one, you would probably say, okay, this was good. I liked it. It's just as good as I thought it was going to be. If you bought 3 or 4, as we did here, and then rated them without actually looking and knowing what you were doing, you would probably be surprised. The one you thought would be the one you really liked, the one you thought would sounded the best, had the best review,
Or the best label.
or the best label,
Or the best sound.
did not turn out to be the one that you thought was the best beer.
Yep. So you think the blind taste testing kept you honest this time around?
It did.
All right, cool. How about it, Reverend Mark? You've walked into a bunch of blind taste testings, but this time around, you think it did the trick?
Oh, absolutely. As a beer judge, that's what we do entirely. We don't know whose beer is before us at any given time. So you have to try to be as objective as you can be, but I'd say that everybody's palate is fairly subjective too.
Yep.
And so you're really going by what really fires off on your taste centers and the things that register most with you. And I think a blind tasting, though, kind of screens out maybe some of the bias that you might bring if you know it's from a particular brewery that you really like.
Like a West Coast, it's made with a certain style of West Coast hop, and your brain is set up that way.
Right. But it's interesting that how many times your palate then will confirm, through experience, what you know about a particular style of beer or, region of beer, as you're doing a blind tasting. So that's always the fun part, to see if your palate kind of lines up with your experience or your knowledge.
So our Beer Geek moment of the week is, what would be the perfect setup for an IPA? How's it like? What's the reference moment? IBU or whatever?
Well, certainly, and we're doing blind tasting today on Imperial IPA, and so to me, I think sort of the reference point is typically what you want it to be, a very hop forward beer, meaning hop forward in the sense of it being clearly bitter. The IBUs, I would say you would want an IBU rating at least at the minimum of 60, which is just really at the low end of the spectrum, up to 120. Now, it's been said that...
So Bud's like, 31?
Yeah, not even that. Yeah, no, a Budweiser would be maybe 10.
Okay, good.
And beer is always a balancing act between malt and or sweet and bitter, which is the hop. And so with an Imperial IPA, what makes it Imperial is its strength, that is its alcoholic strength, which is derived through malt. So if you
Do we
don't,
have to bow before we drink the Imperial beer?
yeah, well, it's interesting that the Imperial designation originally came from the stout. The Imperial stout.
May I have another?
And it was sold actually to the Tsars. And so that's how the Imperial
Are you
stout
saying that
got
the Russians are part of this deal again?
The Russians are involved one way or the other. Always.
It is about. Are the Ruskies going to break out again for this episode as well?
Yeah, but we'll get at least a couple of bottles of really good vodka out of the exchange.
Okay,
so
all right.
We'll be all right.
Well, maybe the Ruskies will visit us later in this conversation. All right, so we tasted these 4. What was one thing out of the chute that made it for you, Reverend Mark?
I think overall I liked the Arctic Panzer. I'd give it a 5. I mean, I just think it seemed to hit the benchmark for me in terms of what
a 5,
a really excellent IPA.
Wow! Listen to the hang time on that. Give me another. All right, okay. So how about a good old boy? Good old boy. Good old boy Jim. So what made it out of the chute for you?
That would be the Oklahoma Pale Ale. For me, it had probably, to my palate, the strongest hop taste, and I tend to go for pretty much anything that has a stronger taste.
Big surprise?
So it was. I mean, I would not have looked down at the label, would not have read the review. Even looking at the reviews that you had printed out.
No pinwheels, no lights off of it.
It didn't say, okay, this is the best thing you've ever had, but it stayed with me, lasted longer, and I pretty much evaluate everything for how long I can taste it. So when we get to the ones that we rated lowest, that's a hint. There was one that just disappeared on the way.
Interesting.
Although I would go back and say that his the Panzer would have been my number 2. So
interesting. Well, there was one that jumped out for me out of this pack, and that was the Lagunitas Hop Stoppid, which was interesting. I'm certainly my buds are wired up a certain way, and I was pretty surprised. So my Suds rating on this was a 3, which is what a relief. And it actually was the highest rating I had out of the 4 that we tasted today. Some of my tasting notes were I thought it was kind of peaty, up front, and had a very quick finish to it, and it was very effervescent. So there was a lot of carbonation on it, and it kind of stood out, from the other 3 that we had. So, all right, so we've revealed at least, our top picks, so we'll kind of wade through each one of these and, kind of share our tasting notes about these as well. All right, so the first one was the Arctic Panzer Wolf from 3 Floyds Brewing. This is a brewery out of Indiana. Makes a lot of great stuff. I mean, I am a huge fan of a beer that they make there called Gumball Head, and they make a lot of great beers. And unfortunately, very difficult to get this beer, outside of an immediate
you have to go to Bowling Green, I think, at least in our area.
Yeah, or within the Chicago metro area itself, to get a lot of this beer. So I'm sorry for those of you on the West Coast. I don't know that you'll even see a 3 Floyds, probably in some time, but they make a lot of great stuff. My tasting notes on the Arctic Panzer was, it's kind of, smoky, woody were the things that I wrote, and but it was probably more bitter than everything else. And so my Suds rating for this was 2. What was that, a Belch? And, that's kind of where I was. Good old boy Jim, how did you think about 3 Floyds here?
I liked it. I was in the 3 to 4 range on this one. I thought it, to me...
it's one or the other. Come on, pick, man. 3 or 4.
3.5. What a relief, and a body shouldn't really make that sound together.
Together. All right. Okay. Just for you today, we'll offer up a 3.5.
I like the carbonation in this one. For me, it bubbled around when I put it in my mouth. That was the thing that I noticed, that it just was really... I wouldn't use the word champagne-y, but there was a lot of carbonation. If you just held it in your mouth, it was just going off. This is not the thing I would recommend drinking with hot chicken, because it would cause
Which is
an
important.
explosion.
There are beers that go with hot chicken and
Highly, highly, highly carbonated.
and beers that don't. And I don't even know that I would even say an IPA in general would be the better choice for hot chicken.
It could send you to the
That's
hospital.
a whole new episode that we can talk about. Beers that go with hot chicken. We could talk about that for 3 hours alone.
We could.
I don't think an IPA would probably be my choice.
Yeah, I go with a milk stout.
Yes.
I usually go with a fire hose. That's about the only thing that goes well with a piece of hot chicken. So, Reverend Mark, what'd you think about 3 Floyds here?
Yeah, well, the three Floyds.
Artic Panzer.
I already rated that.
Oh, okay.
You know,
that was your
it's my top pick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I lost track. Must be the beer already working on me. All right, so
these are Imperial Pale Ales, by the way.
I know, and I haven't had enough of them to get through the day yet. So, all right, so number 2 in our lineup here was the beer made by Choc called the Oklahoma Pale Ale. So this was released back in June, and it is Choc is based out of Oklahoma, as best I can tell, and the Beer Geek notes I have here is that this has a ABV of 6.75, and it's kind of interesting. So we'll change it up here. So, good old boy Jim, what do you think? This was your top pick.
This was my top pick, and again,
so you said that it was just the way that it finished in your mouth
Yes.
was a thing that it lasted forever.
it did, and that tends to be how I rate most things along these lines. Is that the flavors need to be powerful. So,
Which I think is hilarious because here are my tasting notes. I wrote that it was pedestrian.
really,
Yeah, almost watery. Yeah. So my
so
son's
it
rating,
apparently is.
it doesn't hit everybody. I gave
No.
it a 2, which was that a belch for my Suds rating. But hey, it's worthy of saying that's the reason why blind tastings are always interesting. But I'll confess, I've never had this beer before today. Had you had it before?
No.
Good old boy Jim?
Nope.
Oh, interesting.
Have not.
Reverend Mark, what do you think about the Choc beer here, the Oklahoma Pale Ale?
Well, I rated it with a 3. I felt as though it pretty much hit all the markers. It just barely qualifies as an Imperial IPA, I think, in terms of its overall strength. But I think it does have good balance. To me, there was a little more of a caramel aspect to it than the other 3 that we tried. And I think the hop sort of spectrum, that is the bitter, the flavor, and the aroma combined, were somewhat imbalanced, but there wasn't as much bitterness to the finish as you would get with a really big IPA. So it struck me as more of a basic IPA, and it didn't really push the envelope in terms of my taste for it being an Imperial. But still, I give it a good score just for a good beer.
So what's your Suds rating?
3.
A 3.
Yeah.
Ah, what a relief. All right, so if you factor all those together, we're like in the middle of nowhere. All 3 of us are across the spectrum on that. But that's kind of interesting. All right. So the third beer up we had was the Lagunitas Hop Stoppid, which has the picture of a naked woman on it, which I know Jim would have bought it. I mean, just because of that, I'm sure.
But we did not have the bottle, so
We didn't have the bottle, so he had no idea. All right, so I've already rated this one up, which was a 3. What a relief. That was my top pick. How about it, good old boy Jim? What do you think about this?
I gave it a 3 as well. I thought it was clean.
Oh,
was the word
what a relief. Oh, okay.
that I wrote down. It had a good taste. It would honestly would not be one if someone sat before me and would be, okay, I like this. I can have a lot of this.
Are you calling my beer watery?
No. There is one I will, but yours is not watery. I have a special hatred of watery beers. So.
All right. Well,
This is not.
I'm not a fan of beers with a lack of flavor. That's how I would describe that. All right. How about it, Reverend Mark? What do you think of Lagunitas here?
I gave it a 4.
Oh,
and,
a 4. A body shouldn't really not make that sound. Huh. Okay.
And my rationale, and it's interesting now that I know which it was, because we are doing a blind tasting. One thing struck me that I wrote down is that it had a resiny quality, and that is there seemed to be possibly some dry hopping that went on with it right at the end as well, and so it seemed as though it had that extra little punch that if you drank a larger glass of it, you would probably get.
You're going to feel it.
It
has an ABV of 8%. Of course you're going to feel it.
Yeah. But it didn't come off as being all that strong in terms of alcohol. That is, it didn't have that hot alcohol or astringent sort of taste to it. So I thought it was an excellent beer. Didn't give it a top score, but thought it was.
I would confess that if I probably had to think of a flavor profile for Lagunitas beers in general, it would be very hop forward. I mean, I think that their Maximus is probably one of the most hopped up beers I've probably ever tasted. I mean, it's just incredible. So
right. And I think the IBUs on this are even beyond the Maximus, according to what I've read. Yeah.
Wow, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I would have just bought it because it has a naked, woman on the label. But
although it said that the human palate can't really register anything over 80 to 90 IBUs, and so when you get into 100, 110 IBUs, who's to say?
Oh, interesting. All right. So we have one more to talk about, which was the Schlafly Tasmanian IPA. So here were some of my tasting notes around this. I'm sorry, I don't know why I picked this word twice today, but it was pedestrian, but balanced. It was a little bit better than the Choc beer that we had, but my Suds rating on this was a 2. Was that a Belch? And I don't know. I would probably confess I would probably not come back to this beer. If I had a choice of something else. But I mean, I love a lot of beers from Schlafly. Or out of St. Louis. It's a really great brewery. I saw that they recently celebrated their 21st anniversary, I believe. So they've been making beer a long time, and they have a lot of great stuff. So the Beer Geek notes around this it says a ABV of 7.2%. So that's right in line, with some of the other stuff we tried today. So, Reverend Mark, what did you think about Schlafly's Tasmanian IPA here?
I also gave it a 2.
Oh, a 2. Was that a Belch? Interesting. All right.
Yeah. Pedestrian kind of comes to mind.
No, you can't use my word.
Yeah, no, I didn't, and I actually didn't write down that word, but I can just echo your sentiments about that. Maybe this particular bottle of beer, and you have to always remember that too. Sometimes you might have get a bottle or a can, and usually more so with a bottle than a can, that you can get some either light infection or. In this case, I don't think it was that, though, so that's a little off the subject. But it seemed it tasted maybe a little bit oxidized to me, not overly, but there was something kind of stale or kind of off about it, just kind of lingering in the background. Huh. So that's the reason why I kind of knocked it down to a 2.
Interesting. All right, good old boy Jim, what'd you think?
I gave it a 2. I won't go 1 to 2 for this one.
Well, you're not going to make it complicated. All right, so 2, was that a Belch? All right.
Yeah, but it could get close to 1. I mean, for me, this just disappeared. That's the thing that, for me,
Go ahead, reuse my word, pedestrian.
I won't. The words I used were fades away.
Fades away.
It just disappears.
It's all about the finish for you.
It is all about the finish. And it was so flavorless to me, or lingerly. It just did not linger around. And my completely unscientific is there are certain beers that you keep in the garage refrigerator to knock back after you've mowed the yard for 2 hours.
Are any of these beers in that category for you?
This would be one. I mean, It just would not matter because you really aren't going to taste it. You're going to drain the whole bottle in the first sitting just without even taking. This would be that one.
Yeah. Would you still have this with hot chicken?
I don't think hot chicken would bother it.
All right. We've got to have an episode just on that topic alone. All right. Well, it was great to go through these 4 beers and, capture our lineup for these. So I'm curious, would either of you go back and actually probably go after any of these beers again? I mean, there's a lot of IPA on the market. I mean, there's well over probably a couple hundred. We just pulled 4, kind of out of the hat today, but... any of these you would go, I'm going to go back and buy that.
I would go back for the Artic. I would go back for the Oklahoma Pale Ale. I would not go back for the Schlafly.
Huh. All right. How about it, Reverend Mark? What are you thinking?
I would go for the 3 Floyds, most definitely.
Well, they
like
have
you
cool
say-
labels.
Yeah, and for this Arctic Panzer in particular, and then the Hop Stoppid. I think again we'll hopefully get into this in another episode, but I feel as though it's a really good value.
Well, there you have it, everybody. There's our lineup for today. I appreciate our Sud segment. Be sure to keep sipping, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you for joining us right here on Sips, Suds, and Smokes. We hope y'all had a good time. This here recording is done in a dude in the basement studios. Yo, boss, send us some more beer! This is a production of 110 Hand Productions. We look forward to you coming back next time and join us for more enjoyable reviews of Sips, Suds, and Smokes.